Let's make sure this is working. That's not right. There we go. Okay, great. Okay. So, all right. Final reminders. Paper is due today, so you getting your paper in. Try to get it in by the end of the day. Email it. Attach it as a Word document or a PDF document, please. Don't just send me a Google Docs or don't just send me a link or try to share it as a Google Drive, because that doesn't work. It doesn't work. Francis Marion's email does not like it, and even if I'm able to access it and it makes me request permission, by the time it gets to you and you send it back to me, I'm like 5 or 6 papers down, and then I gotta go back and it sends me to the top of my email, and I've got a lot. I've got like 2 full classes of online students, oftentimes multiple students in my other classes that are sending me emails. So just make it so that I can open it right away, grade it, be done, please. For those of you in person, test this next week. Again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or when I'm doing my exams. You can come in any of those days. I really don't care. Whatever works for you. I think for this class, it's Thursday, I think is when ours shows up. It really doesn't matter. It's 8:30 to 10:30. For you online guys, well, since this is a hybrid course, you can come in if you want. Just let me know which class you're in, because I have not seen you all semester. You're welcome to come in. But since you're online, I'll just put the test up on Blackboard like I always do. I'll put it up on Monday, which will be our review day. And you have a week to do it. Get it done. Please get it done as soon as you can, because I cannot extend it. Because by the following Tuesday, I have to get all the grades in. So get it done. This class is not as bad. This class is big, but I do have, like I said, 2 other classes, 102 courses that are packed. So help me get it done. And yeah, that is all I can think of. So we only have a few slides left of this. I have a video I'm going to show at the end. Obviously, I can't just show it over the video thing, so I'm going to, once I post this video up, I will post the link to that video. It's like a 20-minute video. You don't even have to watch the full 20 minutes. You could like skip the first 5-ish. But it's a real good video. It's a real important video. It's not going to be on the test. It's like a post-World War II thing that the U.S. Defense Department put out, I think. It's important for you as an American citizen to watch. I feel it's important to recognize in the modern day certain things. I'm not going to say much more than that, and you will see why. So I'll post it. Check it out. Watch the video for your own edification. This is an education course. I want you to know things. Okay. Back to the actual PowerPoint. So, we talked about the February Revolution, Futilov munitions plant. Nicholas abdicated. provisional government under Alexander Kerensky that shared power with the more radical Petrograd Soviet. So for a little bit, there was a shared, more moderate Bolshevik, well, not even Bolshevik at this time yet, socialist power bloc. And again, the socialists were taking power through democratic means, even though this was technically revolutionary, seizing railway stations and Nicholas abdicating, but like they didn't overthrow Nicholas. They didn't like go into the palace and drag him into the streets. He abdicated, and they stepped into the vacuum that he left. However, with the Tsarist regime falling apart, the German forces sent exiles home, including one Vladimir Lenin, who, if you recall from, I think it was last chapter, the chapter before, he's the brother of one, it was Ulanov, I forget his first name, but he was killed, he was executed for a failed assassination attempt against not Nicholas, but a previous Tsar, aboard a sealed train by April of 1917, which is interesting. Like, he couldn't leave the train until he got there, which, you know, that seems fun. Leon Trotsky arrived the next month, and between Trotsky and Lenin, they are like the two main guys. So Bolshevik, I'm sure you've heard the term Bolshevik. It means party of the majority, but they were not the largest party. They were not the biggest party by far in Russia. However, they were able to gain numbers pretty quickly with their slogan, "Land, Peace, and Bread," because Russia was full of those who wanted land, peace, and bread. The peasants wanted land because they needed land to work. The workers were hungry, and the citizens were tired of the war. So, yeah, land, peace, and bread. So here we have the boys, if you will. Here is Lenin. Lenin stands out. This might be Trotsky. I actually don't know what Trotsky looks like. I don't know what Leon Trotsky looks like. I should probably look him up. But this is definitely Lenin. He stands out. I might actually have yeah, there he is. There's Lenin giving a pretty famous speech. Let's see. Lenin triumphant, 1918. Lenin addresses a crowd gathered in a Red Square outside the Kremlin to celebrate the first anniversary of the October Revolution. So this is actually later than what we'd be doing. In fact, interestingly enough, this image is not the same one as in the book. It's the same speech. He's up on the same thing, but it's a slightly different time. Clearly, multiple photographs were taken during this particular speech, and he's leaning like to the right in both of them. But if you look at it closely, the people down at the bottom are different. Like the little banners are different, like the way they're moving. So yeah, it's interesting that like multiple photographs were taken during this event. I guess someone realized how important this would be. And the reason it's interesting, even though yes, it's 1918, they had cameras, duh, but it's Russia. Like, a camera was pretty rare. So Um, October 1917, the provisional government was still fighting the war, was hit by multiple setbacks, which is to say they were getting their asses kicked by the Germans. Um, Ahead of the elections, the Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace and seized important infrastructure, so basically a coup just before the election. So while the Bolsheviks now essentially have control, now calling themselves the Soviets, they did not immediately make peace because the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk would cut out lots of their land. However, their further attempt at fighting the Germans proved they would lose more land than the treaty would take from them. So they agreed to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and while it did cut out lots of their land, Germany did eventually lose the war, at least in the West, so Russia was able to take back lots of that land, in particular Ukraine, which is going to be an issue for a later war, which we will not have time to get into. So here is, this is, I'm pretty sure, no, this is not a photograph. This is a painting of the storming of the Winter Palace. I think I've got like an even more dramatic, like, heroic storming of the Winter Palace. Which again, I mean, this is just a coup. This is just a what's the word that we were using here? Insurrection is what it was. They decided instead of letting the election happen, they would just go in and take it. You know, like normal people would. So, yeah, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk absolutely ate into Russia. You can see here the lands that they had at the start of the war, you know, way into Europe here, and the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk would just carve massive chunks of land out of Russia. Excuse me, out of Russia. But again, they got all that land back post World War I. Also, the Ottoman Empire got some land, but they weren't as worried about that. I mean, they were worried about it. Obviously, how dare the Ottoman Empire get any land? But they did get quite. I mean, that's actually a lot of land compared to all the stuff happening down here. But anyway. So, as far as World War I, it ended with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. There were still years of civil war and famine in Russia. They fought. We would get more into that in the next chapter with the interwar era, which is brutal in Russia, but again, we unfortunately don't have time. Bulgarians, Austrians, and Ottomans made separate peace treaties. So the last few months of the war, Germany fought alone. There was one final spring offensive where Germany was actually able to push back through the Entente forces. However, it gradually did grind to a halt and then was reversed. Germany's chancellor brokered a peace, but the generals and the Kaiser never admitted defeat, which, okay, the Kaiser was never there. He was never actually fighting. So the armistice was signed on November 11th, 1918, actually specifically at 11:11 a.m. For reasons. So the war was over, but the actual terms of the peace took quite some time. So here we have that final push. March through July of 1918. So yeah, you've got multiple German offensives. The French army's retreat. I know that's a little bit, what's the word? A little stereotypical, but, it's still funny. Of course, by this point, there were American troops in the region, British holding the lines, but what are you going to do? Also, there was one final thing that occurred during this time period that actually ended up being worse than the war, and that was a massive influenza outbreak. Killed between 50 and, according to the American History book, between 50 and 100 million people worldwide. This was at a time when the world population was 1.8 billion. So that's a lot of people. That's a big percentage of the human population. I mean, that's bumping that 0.8 down a couple of notches. So it was called the Spanish flu because the Spanish were neutral in the war, and they were the first to report on it. It was hitting everybody. However, when you're having a war, you don't want to report on a disease that's wiping your guys out, especially when you're still actively recruiting soldiers to go over and fight the war. That doesn't. Jesus fucking Christ! I mean, like, we literally. I don't want to go into it. Yeah, there's stuff about that actually. Now, it's actually thought to have started in the U.S. We've done some, like, forensic pathology. Really not long after it ended, and I remember I showed my students back when I had more time a video on it, and it seems like it started outside of a military outpost, or not military, a military base in Arkansas, and then of course got into the military base, and then the soldiers who were carrying the flu, but we didn't realize they were sick, which again, this was 1916, 1917, they wouldn't have been paying, paying that much attention. Shipped them off to Europe. They got horribly sick, passed it to everybody. And this is something that I always bring up to my American history class because it's not mentioned in the book there. But there are incidents of train cars being loaded up full of healthy soldiers, and by the time they arrive at their destination, it's just train cars full of bodies. Like, it was horrific. And again, it's technically the flu, because the flu does kill several thousand people a year. People are like, oh, I'm not getting the flu shot. I don't need that. It literally kills several thousand people a year. Sure, mostly like the elderly and children, but the flu does have a body count every year. And in this case, it had mutated, and it was especially deadly. Again, the little documentary that I used to show my class when we talked about it here, it it wiped out entire populations of like smaller island nations in the Pacific. There were incidents of like you'd have military bases on an island, and on the other side of the island would be like a little town, and they would communicate over radio. And they would be getting reports of, or not even radio, but like telegraph, I guess, because they didn't quite have radio yet. But they'd get reports of, it's like, oh, there's a flu spreading. And then the next day it'd be, oh, it's significantly worse. Everyone's sick. And then the next day there'd just be nothing. Just complete silence. I mean, like straight up, horror movie stuff. And so they would send like a group of soldiers over to check on the town, and everyone would be dead. Like it would take literally just a couple of days, and everyone was gone. And this is why a lot of East Asian countries, specifically Japan. Japan's the one that's the most obvious, but a lot of East Asian countries, if you so much as have the sniffles, you wear a mask. You wear a medical mask, because it's your responsibility to not spread whatever you have to everyone else. Because they still remember, they still have in their collective cultural memory when this swept through and people were just dying in the streets. So, FYI, yeah. And also, that particular little documentary that I found, which I showed back when I was teaching upstate, which was back in like 2014, 2015, at the end of the video, they were like, oh yeah, these sorts of epidemics tend to hit every 100 years or so, and we're due for another one. And that was in 2014, 2015. Yeah, they weren't far off. Anyway, again, this is very familiar. I live in the neighborhood directly adjacent to MUSC in Florence. And I remember when COVID hit, it was like within a week, the hospital beds were full. Like the entire hospital was over capacity. And so they had like mobile hospital tents in the parking lot. This looks like maybe a gymnasium. I've got one for my American history class, which is, it looks almost like an airport hangar. But I mean, yeah, they would just use whatever big spaces they had, because that's all they could do. And you just would have cots and hope for the best. It was horrific. This one I specifically do have in my American history class, and it hit a little history course. Spanish influenza has endangered the prosecution of the war in Europe. There are 1,500 cases in the Navy Yard. 30 cases have already resulted. Spitting spreads Spanish influenza. Don't spit. Because, again, this is like the 1920s, so people are spitting on the ground. Speaking of which, I need a drink. My mouth is dry. Okay. So, those who won the war. So the Entente had a hard time deciding how to settle the peace. Woodrow Wilson came over and had the 14 points, set up a series of guidelines that he hoped would increase the stability of Europe. Because, well, he saw what had caused the First World War and wanted to avoid that. Two of the main points were national self-determination, which is to say nation-states for ethnic populations to avoid what had happened in the Balkans. which was a problem for places like Austria-Hungary and Russia. So, that was immediately going to be a problem. Um, and a creation of a League of Nations to handle international disputes. The League of Nations is a very early, very powerless, but a good attempt. Again, Wilson was a terrible person, but a decent president. A good attempt at an early United Nations. This is an entire slide in my American history course. Congress wouldn't join the League of Nations. Wilson fought for like 6 months just to get the European powers to agree to it. There was a lot of stuff they wouldn't agree to, but he finally got it to work out. Great for him. Went back home, and Congress wouldn't agree to the League of Nations. Just, that wouldn't happen. There's a lot of stuff behind that. It's not important. This is a European history class, not an American history class. But it fell apart because if the president of the country if the country whose president created the system won't join the system, then it's not going to work. It ain't going to work. And the self-determination turned into mandates, which is to say, sort of like the protectorates we had before with, like Cuba, where they're technically independent, but we still have control over it. Here, they can be independent once we decide they can be independent. So it's still a lot of this, like, racial self-determination, we know what's good for them sort of crap. So here are Wilson's 14 points. Again, the main important thing is mostly just the League of Nations or Association of Nations, as I said here. And is there a self-determination on there? Adjustment of colonial claims, I think, is the main one for that. And then, there's a lot of, like, more specific things. Belgian sovereignty, independent Poland, withdrawing the Balkan boundaries, etc. So a lot of that is basically ethnic self-determination. Of course, those who lost a lot. Hungary lost 2/3 of its territory with the Treaty of Trianon. Bulgaria lost Yugoslavia, had to reduce its army with the Treaty of Neuilly. Treaty of Saint-Germain gave Austrians so little land that even socialists who, again, were trying to maintain this, like, we're trying to stay above the idea of nationalism. Even the socialists were like, yeah, we might as well just join with Germany. They were pushing for an Anschluss before the Anschluss even happened. Germany is the only one you need to worry about. The Treaty of Versailles, because of course it's the Treaty of Versailles. You don't need to worry about the other ones. I don't think I have you to worry about the other ones. Treaty of Versailles, lost territory to the French and Poles, had to pay a massive war indemnity, disarmed their military, signed the War Guilt Clause that forced them to agree that they were the ones that caused the war. Which, by the way, is the default paper topic, which we're going to do today. I used to being a little further along than this. Which, again, you can argue that anybody in... I need to turn this down because I know there's a thing coming up. I know it's not. It's World War II before the thing comes up. You can't argue that, like, anybody was really kind of responsible for it, which that's the point. Or, again, you can talk about basically anything from the first one was about? Napoleon until like World War II? Anything in that time period you want to talk about? Just get the paper. If you want to do the paper. If you feel like you've done fine on the test so far, and you've done the first paper, then you can just skip the second paper, and I'll just, air quotes, give you a 0, and then I'll just drop that. So, it's up to you. Alright, so there is Europe post-World War I. You can see Austria is just destroyed. I mean, if you remember Austria before, it was big. Austria is now this tiny little state. It's split off from Hungary. Czechoslovakia is now a thing. Yugoslavia is now huge. Romania, Bulgaria, they're both bigger than Austria. Albania is almost as big as Austria. Poland is now its own thing. We've got sort of Eastern Prussia, which is technically Germany still. I don't know what Danzig is. I don't think Danzig sticks around. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. So you've got all these over here. Germany still lost a lot of land, but Germany's still in better shape than poor Austria. Where'd my it's like, where'd my clicker goes? I guess in my pocket. And one final thing before we finish, because there was one final event. So the Ottoman Empire was falling apart, and the Greeks figured, hey, let's take Istanbul and the Greek coast, or the Asia Minor coast. Why not? It's an opportunistic move, kind of a dick move, but hey, there's no better opportunity now than now. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time talking today, more so than usual. However, the Turkish army under the leadership of the nationalist hero Mustafa Kemal absolutely beat the crap out of the Greek armies and drove them, along with a bunch of Greek and Armenian civilians, out of Asia Minor. So there's no good guy in this situation, because the Turkish armies also drove civilians out of Asia Minor, which they had nothing to do with this. That's war crime stuff. So in 1922, Mustafa Kemal and Greek statesman Eleftherios Venizelos. Jesus. I don't know Greek. I'm sure there's a much easier way to pronounce this than what I'm attempting. This guy issued a trade to avoid genocide. 1.2 million ethnic Greeks who have been living in Turkey for generations, so they spoke Turkish, were sent to Greece, while 800,000 ethnic Turks who had been living in Greece left Greece to go to Asia Minor. So this was a trade to avoid genocide. However, this would only stall further genocide, because of course there's going to be genocide. Everything's awful. This is a really rough part of the world. Obviously, we're not going to get to that yet, but this is one final thing that happened right after World War I that the book mentions. That of course I'm going to bring up, because I'm not just going to skip over. By the way, Greece and Turkey almost genocided each other. So, yeah, that's that. That's it for chapter 22. got plenty of time left. So, I'm going to post this up on Blackboard as well as the video that, again, I want to strongly emphasize, I want you guys to watch. Again, it's not going to be anything you're going to be tested on. It's a post-World War II America. It's sort of technically a propaganda video, but it's something that you guys need to see for various reasons. And again, you'll get why. All right. And again, next Tuesday will be reading day, which I'll be here for like a movie day extra credit thing. That's mostly for my in-person classes, but since this is a hybrid course, if you want to come in, you can do that. If you guys, if you want to, you're welcome to. So yeah. Until I'll see you guys on Monday because that's review day. So until then, if I can find my thing, have a good weekend. Try that again. Have a